Thank Welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Santa Clara City of Santa Clara Homelessness Task Force. I'm Jessie Hewins from Homebase. We are a nonprofit that works with communities to support their efforts to end homelessness. We're based in the Bay Area and work with communities across the state and across the country. We've been hired by the City of Santa Clara to facilitate these task force meetings. So we're really happy to be here in this virtual space with you all tonight. I just wanted to take a minute to introduce the rest of our team on the webinar today. So we've got Carla, Eli, and Joy also here from Homebase. And I also wanted to just take a minute and let the city staff, the folks from the City of Santa Clara who are on the webinar tonight as well, to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself.
I can go ahead and jump in and then folks can follow. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Marcus. I'm the housing manager for the City of Santa Clara, and our division will be working very closely with Homebase on this task force and the homelessness plan that will result after. So we look forward to working with you and continuing to have this discussion. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you. I'm Andrew Crabtree, also with the City of Santa Clara. Adam is really the city lead on this. I'm just listening in.
Hello, this is Jennifer Carvalho. I'm with the housing staff, and I'm happy that we are finally here at our first official meeting.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bené Hamilton. I'm actually new to the area. I practice patent law at a firm in Palo Alto, but I live here in Santa Clara, and I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, welcome. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Joy to take it away.
Thanks, Jessie. Yeah, so hi everyone, really excited to see you all here today. First off, I'll be taking us through some intro slides, starting with some Zoom norms for task force members. So firstly, we'd love to see your faces if it's possible. We ask that you please turn on your cameras so we can see who all is here with us today. And if you have a question, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen before coming off mute, or also feel free to use the chat function to send a message to the hosts and other panelists. And then also, as a reminder, we will be recording this task force session, and it will later be posted on the city's homelessness task force webpage. And if you're experiencing any Zoom woes, please feel free to send a chat to myself, Carla, Jessie, or Eli, or contact us via our team email at cityofsantaclara@homebasecc.org. And for the next slide, we've laid out some Zoom norms for attendees. So these are all the folks joining that are not part of the Homebase team, the city team, or task force members. And so similar to the other slide, we've laid out an option for participation, but it's more to use the Q&A function in order to submit questions to the facilitators. And just to let folks know, we will be moderating the Q&A section. Questions from the public will be received and answered pretty much as time allows throughout the meeting. And we may not be able to answer every question within the time limits, but we'll be saving them and reviewing them for themes and different focus areas. Once again, the task force session will be recorded and later posted to the city's homelessness task force webpage. And if you're experiencing Zoom issues, you can please use the same methods of contacting us. So you can chat to the Homebase team or use our team email as well. And for the next slide, you'll be able to see our agenda for today. So we'll be starting out with some basic information on the homelessness task force including its purpose and the roles of stakeholders. And we'll also spend some time getting to know each other through introductions, as well as setting some group norms and expectations for engagement. And then the third point here will overview some community context just to ground everyone in some foundational knowledge, such as defining homelessness, intros to community data, and also spotlighting some existing strategies and work that's going on in the city. And we'll also have some time to develop some goals and shared values, as well as preview a timeline for these task force meetings and some next steps. So to provide just a little bit more information on what we expect to get through today, we will be getting to know each other, reviewing some basic information on homelessness in the community, and set some values and group norms for how to engage in these task force meetings. We might have some time for questions on the background information that's being provided today, but we won't be asking you all to review any data, get into the specifics of the community plan that will be informed by these task force discussions and meetings, or hold forums for discussion themselves. So on the next slide, I think this is the section that will be going into an overview of the homelessness task force. And so task force members, you may be asking yourself, what did I just sign up for? But we'll be starting off with some foundational concepts here. So in terms of task force goals, it basically includes informing the city plan to end homelessness. So task force recommendations, all the thoughts and things that folks bring forth in these meetings will inform a city plan, which will be written by the home-based team. The time commitment is you all have committed to attending these monthly 2-hour task force meetings on every fourth Thursday of the month, plus some in-between meeting reading to review information and drafts of the plan as they become available and as we kind of work through those. So in terms of topics that we'll cover, there are homelessness related topics regarding anything in the city of Santa Clara, and topics we won't cover is anything outside of the city response to homelessness. And on the next slide, just to get a little bit more detail into the purpose of the task force, the city has endorsed the county's community plan to end homelessness and convened this task force in order to create a city plan to end homelessness. So we know that the city of Santa Clara has a role to play in reducing homelessness and its impact. And we also know that being a smaller city, that role might look different than what makes sense for the county of Santa Clara or a larger city. And so this task force will primarily be identifying what the city and county are already doing well, the gaps that are still existing, brainstorm some options and solutions, and help to prioritize actions that are within the city's capacity in order to reduce homelessness and its impact within the city. So once the task force concludes, Homebase will take the task force feedback and work with the city to draft a plan for the city council to evaluate. And the city really considers the task force a critical partner in the process of developing this plan. And on the next slide, we kind of put together this high-level overview of what we anticipate the first couple meetings to look like. So you can see on the far left, this meeting today is more of a level setting and establishing some ground rules and providing context, as well as developing shared goals and values. For meeting number 2, which will be next month, we plan to discuss initial priorities, provide some opportunities for input on the community engagement plan. So how can we engage other folks in like focus groups, interviews, or additional avenues for participation, as well as coordinating outreach and task force involvement in community engagement. And in terms of what we expect for future meetings, we'll be reviewing findings of data analysis, findings from community engagement processes, discuss the proposed strategies and priority areas, and discuss the goals and recommendations for the draft city plan as well.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
When you're talking about slides, is everyone seeing the slide? Because I'm not seeing no slide. I mean, is that supposed to be normal, or is that supposed to?
Yeah. So are you seeing our faces?
Yeah, I'm seeing your guys' faces. I'm just
Yeah.
not seeing any, like, if you're showing any slides, I'm not
Yeah.
seeing.
So I think you have a choice. You can look at our faces, or I think if you swipe back to where you were before, then you'll
Right.
see the slide, but we'll get really tiny again.
Oh, okay. No, it's okay. I prefer the faces.
Okay, cool. All right. So I think we can go on to the next slide. Okay. And in addition to these overviews and introductory information, we wanted to differentiate and make clear sort of the roles of folks that will be attending and joining these meetings. And so on the left column, you'll see these are roles of the task force members. So we expect y'all to be discussing and advising on homelessness issues at the task force meetings, guiding and supporting community engagement processes, and identifying priorities and providing recommendations for the city plan. And we have kind of two like subtypes of task force members. One is community task force members, which are from each district, and they come with diverse life and career experiences, as well as contribute to the discussion that we'll have a little bit later, and also an opportunity to learn about homelessness in the community. And then we have some task force members who are already a part of agencies in Santa Clara. And so they bring the systemic understanding and help to frame the gaps and see where the most impact might be achieved. And so their roles in implementation will help to further develop the general ideas that we see in these meetings as well. And in the right column, we can see how the members of the public can be involved. So folks can listen in and view these task force meetings, as well as submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. And we'll have other opportunities to participate in community engagement as well. And then on the next slide, we'll be able to view the roles of our team at Homebase and the roles of the city. And so, as Jesse said before, Homebase is kind of the neutral facilitator of the task force, and we will be presenting background information to task force members at these meetings, as well as gathering feedback, and we will be developing the city plan alongside city staff. And for the city staff that are here today, their main purpose is to convene the stakeholders at these meetings, publicize the recordings of the meetings and the work that's being done. Also, to determine whether the proposed solutions are achievable, work with our team at Homebase to develop the city plan and ultimately propose the plan to the city council. So that's kind of the roles of folks in these meetings and the background task force main ideas. And next, we're going to invite our task force members to do some introductions. So on the next slide, we have some prompts for y'all. So task force members, we ask that you share your name, your pronouns, your connection to the city of Santa Clara, and your interest in participating in the task force. And you're welcome to choose one of the icebreaker questions that we have at the bottom of the screen. What's your fondest city of Santa Clara memory? Or tell us about your favorite place or location in the city and why it's special to you. And we can do this popcorn style. So if someone would like to volunteer to start, and then you can just popcorn it off to one of your fellow task force members.
I guess I'll start.
My
name is Michelle Ortega. I guess this whole pronouns thing is kind of new for me, so I guess I would go with she, her, right?
Thanks. Perfect.
Yeah. And is that pretty much all I have to say, or do I like share like experiences or what made me choose to be a part of the task force, or just keep it simple? I mean,
Yeah, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so my whole purpose in this is it's kind of right up like my alley. I just like giving back that was given to me so freely, and I just wanted to like hear other people's you know, stories or whatever. Like I'm open to that. I want to see the other spectrum of it, you know, because I also have a place. And once upon a time I was homeless, you know, so I seen the struggles and the hardships firsthand. So you know, and then when I seen the posting for the task force, I felt like, you know, God was telling me, you know, this is, you know, go this way, go this route, because you can have, you know, you can have an impact, or you could help others that are either homeless or, you know, or is coming out of homelessness and being housed, right? So I'm glad that I was invited to the meeting today, and I'm glad I'm part of the task force, because I feel like I have a lot, you know, you guys can, you know, take upon or share with the other, you know, agencies in the county. And so my favorite city is pretty much like all of the South Bay. I have memories, you know, so I'm a little bit more like old school, you know. I remember when San Jose had some orchards, you know, before the tech, you know, and it was cool because, you know, when I was a kid, we could like, you know, catch crawdads and, you know, pick apricots from the orchards, you know, but that's neither here or there because everything's been, you know, built upon. But yeah, those are like one of my fondest memories. So, you know, I just want to like basically just give back to the community. You know, I want to pay it forward, if that's, you know, the right way or right thing to say. So I want to learn from these meetings, you know, on how I can be a part of something greater than I. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
Lori, I think I saw you come off mute. Would you like to go next?
Sure, I'll go next. Hi there, everybody. My name is Lori Garmany. I was born and raised right in this area. My connection to the city of Santa Clara is huge. I was a preschool director. I opened the very first parent-funded preschool at Palmer Elementary back in 1998. I worked for the school district for many years. I also were open to preschool in Santa Clara off Homestead and Prune Ridge when I was doing a dual preschool. You know, we had an original school in Sunnyvale, and I opened a new one there. So Santa Clara to me has always been, you know, deep in my heart. All my children went through Brawley and then to Wilcox, and then my youngest son went to Don Calajan, and I've been PTA president over 10 times at all the different schools. At Don Calajan, actually, they have a disco, more of a parent group, but I was the president there and started the Spring Fling and all that great stuff over at that school. I also have a 5-year-old that I'm raising who he's biologically not mine, but I told him he's from my heart. And so he's going to be hopefully going to Don Calajan next year. Right now he's in Montague Transitional Kindergarten. So I'm still, you know, still in there. We came, I've lived mostly in, you know, Santa Clara, and then we've been in Milpitas and even the North San Jose part. But I was super interested in participating because back in 2018, you know, it only takes a certain something to happen and you find yourself where you never thought you'd find yourself. And I was married to one person since I met him at 15. I got married at 19. I thought we'd be together forever. Unfortunately, this crazy world changed things around, and I had to leave him at 48 and found myself in a place where either you stay and you continue getting things happening, or you make a change and then you're not really sure what the future holds. And so at that moment in my life, I knew that I had to do something. After raising my 3 boys, then I raised my 3 grandkids, and I'm on my 7th one that I'm raising. So we were in a house, and the renters wanted it, or, the owners wanted it back. And because of a divorce, my credit was horrible. And we actually found ourselves, I admitted the little boy that I've been with his dad for 5 years. So he's my best friend and just the most awesome dude in the world, works at the family courthouse and helps dads who have lost their kids. So that's another day. But anyway, we found ourselves homeless because my credit was horrible because of the divorce, because all the bills came to me, and I really didn't see myself this ever happening. And so by God's grace, we had a family member who worked for the Marriott company. So for 4 months, we pretend like we were on vacation, and we were able to stay in, residence in all these different hotels for $39 to $49 a night. And we did that for, I think, like 4 or 5 months. And then we had to go and stay on someone's couch for 2 months until we finally was able to save up and get our own place. And so we've been here in the Lake Santa Clara area for over 2 years now. And it was awesome to be back here because Don Calajan has been so close to my heart, and I really wanted our little guide to go there and volunteer like I always do. So that's where I'm coming from. I would have never guessed that would have happened. I'm also one of those people that when I see homeless people out here, I feed them. So, there's a story behind every homeless person, whether it's addiction, whether it's, mental health, or whether it's that paycheck to paycheck mode. So I find myself getting to know some homeless people and trying to help where I can. The last thing I'll say is the fondest memory of Santa Clara memory is I actually was one of the first people that started the live nativity over Santa Clara First Baptist Church, because it actually started at Sunnyvale First Baptist Church, and then they brought it to Santa Clara First Baptist Church. And so that's and that was like 30 years ago, I think. So that's one of my fondest memories. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Vinay, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Vinay Hamilton, and I think I kind of jumped the gun earlier with my little intro. I never know what to say. So my pronouns are she, her. And as I mentioned earlier, my connection to Santa Clara is I moved here literally January 1 of this year. Prior to moving here, I was in San Diego for the last 3 or so years for work. As I mentioned earlier, I practice intellectual property law. In a former life, I was a scientist, and I decided that I didn't want to do bench research anymore. So then I moved into patent law, and I started my career in Boston and moved to San Diego because I was experiencing burnout and I wanted someplace pretty to live. So I moved there, and it was supposed to just be for a year, and I ended up staying. This is year 4 in California, which is wild to me. I'm originally from South Carolina, but one of the things that has always been important to me, of course, yes, giving back and all of the things, but the part of San Diego that I lived in, it was, I lived in Del Mar, which is close to La Jolla, and lots of pretty beaches and things like that. And one evening I'm out with, some friends, and we went to a different part of San Diego. And, I see all of these encampments that you would not find anywhere near Del Mar. You don't see it in La Jolla. And I'm just like, so we're okay with this, because in South Carolina, I'm not saying that we don't have a homelessness problem. I'm from Charleston. I grew up in Columbia, but it just wasn't like what I saw in San Diego. And I'm just like, well, it just seems like no one, and I know it's a huge problem, but no one, it just felt like no one was doing anything about it. So then I moved here to Santa Clara, and my building is connected to a Whole Foods and a shopping center and all of this stuff. And you see people, trickling into the Whole Foods, as they should, And then on the outside of that, you see other people who are pushing carts. And once again, I have this moment where I'm like, does no one see this? And so I don't know. I was having that just not even an inner war, but just that kind of shell shock moment or what have you, and also looking to connect to the city. And I'm on Instagram and I see, I believe it was Instagram where I saw, or it might have been from me signing up for something where I saw, an advertisement for the task force. And so I just felt like that was kind of, an answer to me feeling like there's this huge problem and you don't know what to do about it. So just an awesome way to get involved. Also a way to step away from, my whole life is about science and law. And that's good in and of itself, but just a way to get away from all of that as well. And pour yourself into something, not saying that it's not important, but just pour yourself into something that has a more tangible effect in the shorter term, as opposed to, drugs that will be out on the market years and years from now. And then finally, okay, so truthfully about me, I don't have a favorite place or location yet. I literally, I stay at home. So that's a thing. I am extremely introverted. I mean, no surprise there with the whole science and law thing. But I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. Andrea, would you like to go next?
Joy. I'm Andrea Urton. My pronouns are she and hers. And my connection to the city of Santa Clara is I'm the CEO for Home First Services. We're a large provider of services in Santa Clara County, and we own and operate Sobrato Family Living Center, which is 51 units of affordable housing designated at 50% AMI. In the city of Santa Clara. And I obviously wanted to participate in the task force because homelessness is a passion of mine. It's near to dear to my heart, and I'm just so grateful I get to do it for a living. And I wanted to be of value, and I wanted to add a voice of a provider. And I also have some lived experience in this arena. And so I have a lens, a very specific around, Sparky Harlan will understand that, a lens of being homeless as a teenager and young adult. So I bring that to the role as well. And I think my favorite memory of Santa Clara is just the time that I've spent with staff and our residents at Sobrato Family Living Center, especially in the holidays when we hand out gifts for the kids and the families, and we make sure they have food boxes. And it's a really beautiful time to watch people who are so struggling so much in so many ways and are so happy and excited and engaged in their community, and how they come together to support and each other. And so yeah, so that's me.
Thank you. How about Anne? Would you like to go next?
Sure. Well, I'll start. My name is Anne McMahon. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I've lived in the city of Santa Clara for 18 years now. And I am really honored to be part of the task force, and certainly hearing people's testimonies up until now is really quite humbling. So thanks so much. I'm a member of a faith community here in Santa Clara, St. Clair Parish, down in the Old Quad section of Santa Clara. And I'm active in their social justice group. And homelessness is one of those issues that I feel like in the 18 years that I've lived here, it's not getting better. And I feel like it's time for me to play a role in helping to make things better. I've been blessed in my life, and I want to give back as much as I can. I'd say that my fondest memory of this of Santa Clara is probably just bringing my kids to parks. We have some great parks in Santa Clara, and open space is a wonderful thing. So it's a way for us to enjoy the beautiful California weather. So that's it for me. And again, I'm really happy to be on the task force, and I look forward to an opportunity to getting to know everyone a little bit better. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. Ray, how about you go next?
Sounds like a plan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ray Bramson. My pronouns are he and him. I am the Chief Operating Officer with Destination Home. Destination Home is a public-private partnership. It's focused on ending homelessness and preventing homelessness in Santa Clara County. My connection to the city of Santa Clara is, I think for the past several years, Santa Clara and the fantastic staff that work there have really been leaders in advancing deeply affordable housing and solutions to homelessness, and is evidenced by this task force right now. So a lot of focus, a lot of energy on this pretty critical issue. So, we want to be a part of that work. We want to support the city in their efforts. So, we're here today in the spirit of that support. I'll say my favorite place or location, and Vivian Wan is also on this call, so I hope you appreciate this, Vivian, but my favorite location right now in the city of Santa Clara is the corner of Corvin and Kiefer, and that's the site of Calabasas Apartments, which is 145 new homes of deeply affordable and supportive housing for our neighbors that's operated by Allied and Abode Services. And it's one of many sites, and lots of folks on this call I know are doing great work here in different locations, but it just happens to be the newest. So it's my favorite right now, and it's a beautiful new development. I encourage everybody to go take a look. So I'm very happy to be here. I want to contribute any way I can and continue to support the city as it moves forward. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Kat, would you like to go next?
Thank you. My name is Catherine Pham, but I do go by Kat, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I've lived in Santa Clara for 8 years now, and my interest in participating in this task force is I already participate and an active member with an organization called Stand Up for Kids that help homeless youth with services to get them back on their feet. And so I thought that extending my interest there to the city that I live in would make a nice segue there. My fondest memory, Santa Clara University brought me to the city, and I've lived here since. And I really enjoy my neighbors a lot. It's the first city that I've lived in where we're just friends. Dogs unite us, but our common interests continue to make us friends. So,
thanks, Kat. Dante, would you like to go next?
Yes. Name is Dante Lartique. Pronouns he, him, his. Connection to the city of Santa Clara. My mom actually used to live in a hotel that was converted to Covenant House. Actually converted it, and my mom lived there for about 3.5 years as she experienced homelessness on and off. And I think another member said, they got lucky to stay in, a nice hotel for, a pretty good rate. But my mom, she had to stay in this hotel called the Best and Western off of El Camino in Las Palmas for about 3.5 years on and off. Before that, she lived in a house on Via Dondera behind the Motel 6 on Pomeroy in El Camino. And that's kind of how I got introduced to the city of Santa Clara. I would come there and do my weekend visits when I was in foster care, when I was a teenager. And didn't really know much about the city until years later when I actually moved into my apartment in Santa Clara at Peacock Commons, and I've been there for about almost 10 years. Stability is like the most important thing to me. And through my childhood in foster care with my mother, I've was homeless a few times, couch surfing as a transition age youth, and then also as a runaway while I was, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. And yeah, I think I would probably say my interest in participating in this task force is the fact that, I have a ton of lived experience in and out of systems. I'm also the founder and CEO of an organization called Raising the Bar that provides mentorship and housing resources to transition age youth coming out of foster care between the ages of 18 to 24, essentially. And I believe peer-to-peer, is one of the most important alternatives to what we have that is going to help get the outcomes that. And so that's kind of why I'm participating in this. I think youth homelessness is, I think data is a little skewed, and I think youth homelessness is on the rise in many aspects, and it shouldn't be. I think there's a lot of resources from the local government and the nonprofit sector that can be utilized more efficiently to better serve this population. And, I just hate being out on the streets, meeting folks that are a lot older than me that are former foster youth, and they've been homeless for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years. And it just doesn't make sense to me being in the Silicon Valley. And so I just thought I would do something about it, and that's what I've been trying to do. I think providers need to work more collaboratively. I think we need to focus on more public-private partnerships. And I think you need to listen to people with lived experience, and not only listen to them, we need to basically, in my opinion, we need to infiltrate, if you will, from the top to the bottom. We need to put people in positions of lived experience in roles that can influence and really change the narrative and the outcomes in our community. And so that's why I'm interested in that. Icebreaker, fondest memory in Santa Clara. I would say, for me, my son, when he was about 4 years old, started playing t-ball. And I remember just sitting on the grass, the lawn at the Central Park, the main park here. And I could just remember being overwhelmed with a lot of emotions, knowing that my son was safe in a good environment and that I could let my guard down a little bit. And I just love seeing my son play in an environment where I was a kid. I had to always have my guard up, and I had to be, I had to be something other than a kid. And so I would say, that's probably the dearest thing to my heart in the city of Santa Clara.
Great, thanks, Dante. Vivian, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I'm Vivian Wan. My pronouns are she, her, hers. It's really great to be with you all tonight. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Abode Services. We're a service providing agency and a housing agency throughout the Greater Bay Area. In Santa Clara County specifically, we've operated tenant-based rental assistance programs for years. And as Ray mentioned, we just built a 145-unit site called Calabasas, and we're breaking ground on the site next door at Kiefer. So we're really excited to bring more permanent supportive housing to this community to end homelessness, because we end homelessness through housing. People are no longer homeless when they're housed. So we need to create more and create easier, more efficient pathways into housing. Why I'm on this task force and in this field is because I deeply, in my heart of hearts, think that ending homelessness is possible, and we can do it if we collectively work together on it, and that everyone deserves a home. I'm homeless agnostic, meaning I don't care if you're a veteran, a transition age youth, someone who's been homeless for one day or 20 years, that everyone really deserves to be inside and that's how health and wellness starts, is when they go inside. My favorite, Ray stole my thunder. My favorite probably moment was at our groundbreaking at Calabasas. Now we have more than 100 households living there, and it was just wonderful to really know that we were starting the path to housing for so many by breaking ground. So I'm really happy to be with y'all, and I will pass it on to the next.
Thank you. Sparky, would you like to go?
Sure, I'll go with all my compadres who have gone ahead of me. Like Andrea Erton and many of the providers here, we've worked together for many years, and Andrea and I have similar backgrounds as teens on the street. That kind of got us doing this services, but I'm CEO of Bill Wilson Center in Santa Clara, she, her, and I've been CEO of that organization for 39 years, working on the Alameda. As many of you may know, at least the city staff, Bill Wilson was a former mayor of Santa Clara back in the late 60s and helped start the organization and helped start our minor shelter that we still operate in 1977. And we do school-based services and services for St. Clair School. And we also have several housing projects that Santa Clara has purchased for us through the old days of redevelopment money. We wish we had that back. And I will say that probably I have to think about Dante as for one of my favorite moments. I remember when we were trying to rehab Peacock. First of all, if you drive down Lawrence and you look to your right when you're going toward Kaiser, you'll see this bright teal building. That's Peacock Commons. And City of Santa Clara was like, you can't paint this building this color. They're more into kind of mission beige colors. And we were like, we want a lot of different bright colors. And the other thing they try to do is limit our permanent housing to 5 years, because they said youth shouldn't be in housing for more than 5 years. They should move on. And we really fought to make it permanent. And I think Dante's a good example of how important it is for people to have place and to have permanent housing. And we shouldn't treat young people differently than we would older adults. So I have to thank you. And the other thing I have to thank Santa Clara is Santa Clara put a lot of money into our minor shelter and all these facilities. And what they said to Bill Wilson Center is, we don't care if you take homeless people outside the city limits. If they're at your shelter, we consider them Santa Clara residents because they're homeless. And a lot of cities don't do that. It's like, do you have a Santa Clara address? The last one. And Santa Clara never did that. So they kind of owned that it was important to, especially with homeless youth, to serve them. And so I do want to give props to the City of Santa Clara for supporting us in that area.
Great, thanks, Sparky. Let's see, I think Hillary, have you gone yet?
No, thanks, Joy. Hi, everyone. My name is Hillary Baroga. My pronouns are she, her. And my personal connection to the city of Santa Clara is that I went to school at Santa Clara University. So that's what brought me here to the Bay Area and got me to stay. I now work for the County of Santa Clara's Office of Supportive Housing. And at the Office of Supportive Housing, we deliver services for people who are unhoused and people who are in supportive housing. We also help fund and spur the development of supportive and affordable housing throughout the county. And then we also help with the overall coordination, planning, and evaluation of the supportive housing system countywide. So I am interested in participating in the task force because the city of Santa Clara is a great partner to the work that is being done in the supportive housing system and has been for several years. And so similar to Ray, any way that the county can support the city in advancing the end of homelessness, we are happy to do. My fondest memory in the city of Santa Clara, if I'm being honest, is my freshman year of college actually was an El Nino year with so much rain. And one evening, my friends and I decided that it was a great idea with the pouring rain to go slip and sliding on the grassy areas at the Santa Clara University campus. So I have many actually fond memories in the city of Santa Clara, but that was definitely a highlight.
Great, thanks, Hillary. And I think we've had all the task force members introduce themselves. Eli, did you want to take in?
Yes, thank you. So we want to follow up with a few other introductions. We want to welcome Santa Clara City Council Member Becker. And Councilmember Becker, just to give you a very brief heads up and warning, we're going to make you a panelist for a moment, just in case you want to introduce yourself to the meeting.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'm in the car right now and I wanted to catch this meeting because I'm going in between other meetings, but it's an honor that it's an honor actually to be here, and I'm proud to hear that we are taking these steps to combat homelessness. I know a few on this call have mentioned about, the times of couch surfing, so I can relate to that. I was a very starving student when I was going to college, and it was really hard to find housing. And even now as a council member, it is still hard to find housing. And I know some of our electeds are actually renters as well. And it's really hard on millennials, especially seniors. And I know a lot of seniors in this area that are being priced out. And we do not want a lot of our residents and our people, especially in our county, let alone our county, to be on the street. So I really am looking forward to what you'll be doing, all your recommendations and all of your priorities. And so again, thank you for your service. And I'm hoping that we can solve the problems together by putting our heads together.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining the meeting today. I also want to introduce a couple of other folks who are joining us from the city of Santa Clara today. So welcome Jonathan Veach, assistant to the city manager, and Sergeant Greg Dager. They are also here. And one of the things that we want to thank the city staff and the city folks who are here today for is the expertise and the knowledge they bring about the city and its resources. So thanks for being here.
Great.
And I'll throw it back to Joy.
Sweet. Thanks, Eli. Yeah, so just to wrap up the introduction section of today's meeting, we've started some discussion guidelines and norms. So as you can see these all on the screen, we ask that you can be as present as you can and attempt to manage your other distractions and respect others' voices as well. And we're operating under the assumption that all perspectives are valued in this space. We encourage folks to speak from your own personal or professional lived experiences. We ask that you also listen to understand, step up, step back. So if you're normally a little bit on the quieter side, we ask you to participate. And then if you are normally very vocal, we ask that you share space with your colleagues as well. Please engage, period. We ask you to respond to questions, ask things of others, and so on and so forth. Also respecting others' thoughts and feelings, even when they differ from my own. And so those are the norms that we've kind of developed thus far. Is there any other discussion guideline or norm that the task force members feel should be included in this list? Right. Okay, awesome. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Eli.
Great. Thanks, Joy. And thank you all task force members for sharing your connections to the city of Santa Clara and why you're here. We really appreciate all of you being here, and we appreciate you sharing of yourselves through this process. At this point, I want to remind folks who are attendees, folks who are here to listen along and learn, and are not task force members. The way that you can participate a little bit more actively, if you have questions or thoughts, is through the Q&A function. So just a reminder that that Q&A function is there. If you're looking at Zoom on your computer, there should be a navigation bar at the bottom, and there's a little Q&A symbol with some speech bubbles on it. And if you click that, you should be able to type in a question. So we have one of our colleagues is keeping up with the Q&A. So if you have questions, please take advantage of that. Okay, so we've been here for about an hour, and we have about another hour left. So I'm going to encourage folks to do what you need to do to take care of your human bodies during this long Zoom meeting. If you need to stretch, if you need to stand up at any point, please do that. We're going to go through some context and some background information. And a lot of this piece, because we want to make sure that everybody's coming in with a lot of different experiences, we start building a shared set of understanding and knowledge about homelessness in the city of Santa Clara. I'm going to be a lot of me talking and having slides, but I do have planned a few places where I'm going to pause, and I have some discussion questions we're going to talk about. But I just want to call out that this is not going to be the main thing we do at most meetings. We're definitely going to hear from you. We're going to have discussion, but we're using this meeting as sort of an introduction. So the first thing we want to talk about is, who are we talking about, right? We want to introduce for the task force and for the city's strategic plan process, the definition of homeless or homelessness that we want to be using. And first, before we get there, I want to talk about some of the definitions of homeless and homelessness that are used in the country, across the country, and locally, and sort of how those will also play into the work. So there are two main federal definitions of the word homeless or of homelessness that are used for our sort of federal government programs and funding streams. There are actually more than just these two, but these are two big ones. One is used by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's the federal department that disperses and manages most of the funding and the programs that are specifically targeted to people who are experiencing homelessness. The HUD definition of homelessness is, in these bullet points, it's folks who are in shelter, transitional housing, people who are sleeping outside or in a vehicle or in some other place that wasn't designed to be lived in, not meant to be lived in by a human. It also includes people who are in a specific situation of about to lose their housing within 14 days. And it also includes people who are fleeing or attempting to flee unsafe situations, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, stalking. This is a fairly actually limited definition of homelessness, but it's one that is used for a lot of the data sources that we're going to be looking at. So just keep in mind that when we look at data today, a lot of those data sources are working with a definition that is like this or very similar to this. Another federal definition of homelessness comes from the McKinney-Vento world. That's the name of a law, the McKinney-Vento Act. But it's used to refer to particular federal or education definition. It's used a lot in the education and the youth world. And it, in addition to youth who are in shelter, transitional housing, sleeping outside, or in vehicles, it also includes children and youth who are sharing housing with others. So sometimes we refer to this as doubled up or couch surfing. Folks who are sharing housing specifically because they don't have a place to live of their own out of necessity, right? Or people who are paying for their own hotel rooms, people living in trailer parks and campgrounds. This is the language that we see in the education definition, right? So it's a little bit broader. We may at some point in this process look at some data from school systems that use this definition. So I wanted to call that out. But for our purposes, we don't have to take anybody else's understanding of who the population of people who are experiencing homelessness is and who the population of people that we want to focus our work on with this task force. So we propose that as a task force, we take a broad view of who the target population is that we're wanting to support through the strategic plan that the city develops, including people who are at risk of losing their housing, people who are unstably housed, people who may need prevention supports in order to keep their housing, people who are living in overcrowded housing, people who may have places to sleep at night, but they don't have a single stable permanent place, so they're moving around all the time, right? So those situations that are like sharing housing out of necessity or couch surfing, people who may periodically lose their housing and then find housing again and then lose it again, right? They're sort of people who are living in sort of on the border between continued housing instability and being unhoused. Definitely people who are in cars, sleeping in cars or vans or RVs, people who lost their housing for the first time during the pandemic, as well as people who may have experienced homelessness over long periods of time. Just calling out that we want to take a broad understanding of who the people in our community are who are unhoused, so that when we're talking about strategies and supports, we're bringing that broad understanding of a target population. I'm going to pause here for any really quick questions specifically about how we should think of what the word unhoused or homeless means. Just in case any of that was unclear. Go ahead, Sparky.
Yes, I was just on a policy call today where there's several senators and on the House side introducing legislation around these definitions, especially trying to push the McKinney-Vento definition to capture homeless youth, and even to the point of when we do the PIT counts to require that those numbers be part of that homeless count. So these discussions over McKinney-Vento and these definitions have been going on for many years. But on the youth side, and also I would say the family side, these definitions are pretty, fast and heavy as far as using them or not using them, because a lot of times the dollars are tied to numbers, of course. So when you limit numbers and say there's only 100 homeless families on the street of San Jose, which they said one year, and I think all of us would say, are you kidding me? It's important, I think, to take a broader picture to understand this, as you were saying, this at risk of homelessness, or, using the broader definition.
Yeah. Thank you for that context, Sparky. I think that's really helpful. And while the definitions are it's all about, the rules and the regulations, and they can get really sort of fiddly. I think it, like you said, it's important to address them, because as you pointed out, they impact things like funding, they impact who certain programs can serve. So yeah, thanks for that important context. Okay, the next bit of context we're going to give is a look at some of the data that we have about people who are experiencing homelessness in the city of Santa Clara. And in order to talk about the data, I'm first going to quickly introduce where the data comes from. So we're going to have some slides about data sources sort of peppered in here. The first source of data we want to talk about is the point in time count. Folks might be familiar with the point in time count, even if you're not part of, working for one of the providers in the community. This is a volunteer-based census and survey that happens. For the most part, it happens every other year, every 2 years, and typically it's on one night in January. And It involves a volunteer-based visual count. So teams of folks go out into across the county of Santa Clara and try to count by just looking at the world how many people they see who seem to be living or sleeping outside or in a vehicle. It also involves a count of folks who are staying in shelter on that same day, right? That same point in time. And it involves a survey component of a large, sort of hopefully representative sample of folks. One of the main things about the point in time count that is of value is that it's done in pretty much the same way every year. The methodology can change a little bit, but it's a fairly consistent way of taking a snapshot of what does homelessness look like on this one day across the entire county. There are, of course, always going to be drawbacks to any point in time number and to any visual count of human beings. One thing that we know is that the point in time count in any community, we expect it to be an undercount of people who are experiencing homelessness, because sometimes we're not going to see everybody who's out there on a given night. And we also know that it is only the people who are unhoused on that night. If someone lost their housing the next day, they weren't counted because it was a one night sort of snapshot look. And so we also know that more people are homeless through the course of 1 year, for example, than are reflected in the point in time count numbers we're going to look at. So just some context about what data can tell us and what it can't in this case. Then I also want to call out that the point in time data we're going to be looking at is from January of 2019. This is because the COVID-19 pandemic created some pretty important safety concerns for the count that would have been held in January of 2021. So that count was canceled. And then with the surge in COVID over the winter this year, the 2022 point in time count that was rescheduled from 2021 had to be pushed to February. So where we are is we have 2019 data is our most recent, and then the 2022 point in time count data is going to be coming out this year, we expect. So when that comes out, we'll definitely let y'all know that we have fresh data.
Yeah, I got my camera. You hungry?
So now we're going to look at some of the data. This is, so this graph shows point in time data from 2013, 2015, 2017, and 2019. It shows that point in time count number over time. And the taller orange bars are numbers for the entire county of Santa Clara, while the shorter yellow bars are numbers for the city of Santa Clara specifically. As you look at those numbers, I want to sort of use them to make a particular point. And that is, I think this graph really points us to the fact that homelessness is an extremely local concern, right? It's extremely local experience. And it's also at the same time, like a truly regional challenge. One of the things that we know, obviously, from this data, but also from our experience in the world, is that there are people who are living outside and in cars and in shelter, or outside and in cars in the city of Santa Clara, in its neighborhoods, right? We know this. We also know from our experience in the world that living in a place like the Bay Area, and in Santa Clara County in particular, cities are pushed right up against each other, right? Like I grew up in Willow Glen and in San Jose, and I know that you can live in one city and work in another, and like have a favorite coffee shop that's in a third entirely different city that's 10 blocks away from where you live. And all the cities, it's sometimes hard to tell when you're moving from one city to another. So we want to keep both of those things in mind, I think, as we move through this process, where we want to think and talk about what solutions and ideas for the city of Santa Clara, right, for our neighborhoods and our community very locally, but we also want to keep in mind what is happening at a broader regional county level to support people who are experiencing homelessness, because truly this challenge is something that we all share. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with a couple other slides of PIT data and then pause for questions. So these are some other graphics that come from the point in time count in 2019, and they are pulling out some responses to that survey that I mentioned. So a large sample of folks are asked specific questions about their experience. And I've pulled out the top most common responses for what was the primary event or situation that led to homelessness for a particular person, and then the top responses to what are the main obstacles to regaining permanent housing for you, or obtaining permanent housing. So on the left here, one of the things I wanted to point out about this, and the story, part of the story I think it tells, is that we see the causes that people are identifying for themselves for what led to their current experience of homelessness are really diverse. And they touch on like a bunch of different life areas, from job security to mental health to relationships, interpersonal relationships. So I think that this really points us to, like, we're not talking about a monolith of human experience. We're talking about a really diverse human experience of losing housing. And then the graphic on the right is about asking folks, so in your current experience, not having housing, what's your biggest obstacles? And as you can see, people can select more than one. But the thing I wanted to call out here is that if you look at the responses to this question over time and year after year in the point in time count, it's interesting that we see challenges that are really related to income and the housing market. And while we know that the full story for every person is more complicated than this, right? These are very simplistic graphics. Though that trend of seeing income and housing market coming out and people identifying their biggest barriers, that matches with what we know about the really expensive housing market and the competitive housing market that we have in the Bay Area and in the county of Santa Clara. Finally, this is a graphic that I come back to a lot because I think it's very visually good. It's one of the best graphics I've seen, but it's also interesting in the information it gives. So what this is showing is people's responses to the question, something like, where were you living when you most recently became homeless, when you most recently lost your housing? What we see is that on one hand, 81% of folks say that they were living in Santa Clara County. And on the other end of the spectrum, just 4% of people say that they were living outside of California at the time that they most recently lost their housing. So I think this brings it back again for me, the sort of regional and local nature of homelessness, where we don't have this data specifically for the city of Santa Clara, but we can see that in Santa Clara County, very consistently, again, year after year, we see a pattern like this. We see very high percentage of folks saying, yeah, last time I was housed was in this county. I was here when I lost my housing. So I want to pause really quickly and get just a few thoughts from the task force members. If you have a question, please also feel free to ask questions about the data. But I'd also love to hear, was there anything there that surprised you about the numbers that we just looked at?
I think for myself, I was expecting to see the numbers increase because I think visually or within my surroundings, I feel like there's an increase, but according to the chart, it ebbs and flows. But that was something that did not align with my expectations.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And again, this is, it's with one point in time every 2 years, it can be a little hard to show a trend. But yeah, it's a great point. Other thoughts or questions?
I just have a thought.
Mm-hmm.
I just noticed in the last 20 years, the homeless population has become a lot worse. So I remember a time where the homeless was more like hidden away, like under bridges, tucked away. And now the homeless are more like known, like you could see them out like in businesses, you could see them down the street. And it wasn't like that in San Jose like 20 years ago, I recall. And I know because of the pandemic, oh my God, it's just like it blew up like everywhere.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so like I have a brother right now who's homeless, and he fits most of the criteria because he does have issues with drugs and issues with those kind of things. Because when I used to be homeless, I didn't fit the stigma. I didn't have drug problems. I didn't have mental health. I just fell on some hard times. And it was because of personal that I lost my place. It was the rent as well, but it was also, because it was personal issues. So when I became homeless, I experienced like every level of homelessness. I lived in the street. I lived in the shelters. I lived in the car. I lived in motels. And then by God's grace, I finally got my own place, so I know what it's like to be out there, but I think there's also like a huge stigma too, that not everybody that's homeless does drugs. Not everybody has mental health illness, which might be the majority, but there's a few of us that just fell on some hard times. You know what I mean? And hearing everybody's story, everybody introduction, I was feeling kind of like out of place just because I'm not a provider myself. I've been through hardships, yes. I've seen firsthand what it's like to be homeless and how that can have an effect on your mental health. And sometimes you feel like you want to commit suicide because of the daily grind, having to survive, and then doing it with 2 animals. I did this with 2 dogs. And then having to go through the process of trying to get housed and trying to go into these shelters. But that's not always the answer, because a lot of homeless people that I've talked to, they don't want to go into the shelters because they like to be independent. They like to do what they want to do in their own time. They don't want to have to deal with other people, have a curfew. I've met a lot of homeless people like that. And I was one of them myself. I prefer to stay outside as opposed to go in the shelter. Because, this is during the time, thank God I wasn't there during the pandemic, but it's a lot of homeless people don't want to be in shelters, because of the overcrowding. There's a lot of, just it's crazy.
Yeah.
So
and
I prefer, just real quick, I prefer to live in my vehicle at the time because I didn't have to deal with the hassle. I didn't have to deal with, other people, and it was more like for, how it's going to affect me in the long run. So my thing was, a lot of homeless people don't want to go into shelters. And I think that's why there's still homeless people, because not everybody wants to go to homeless shelters. They want to be on their own. They want to be independent. They don't want to be bothered. So, I was thinking when I got into this meeting for the task force, I'm like, am I in the right meeting? Because it seems like everybody here are providers, CEOs, or, you know what I mean? So I don't know, like, if I'm in the right place or, because I'm open-minded, I accept everyone. So we're all here trying to, find solutions to the homeless crisis, right?
Yeah.
So
well,
I want to be an advocate for the homeless, the ones who don't have a voice.
Absolutely. Yeah. We absolutely think you're in the right place. We're super glad that you're here on the task force. And I think one of the great things about this task force is that we have community members and providers. We have a whole bunch of different types of expertise that are being brought. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And thanks so much for sharing like the experience and also things you've heard from other folks. I really I hope we come back to that when we start talking about, the types of solutions and the types of things that you all want to discuss, because I think, you know, we want to hear what works. For
Yeah,
sure.
just like my brother, he's homeless, but he's homeless like out in the creek, like in a different area, right? He's not part of the downtown, so he's out where no one, you know, he's not gonna be on the news. He's not gonna be bothered. And there's like, when I went to this homeless encampment, oh my God, it looked like Tent City. I mean, it was huge. I think it's one of the hugest encampments I've seen. It's not just the one at the airport, but this one is bigger than the airport. You know, when the one on the news, how they report on the news, like this is one of the biggest encampments, and I don't think it is. I think if people, I think if the news media went to Ritter Park and Brokaw by the freeway 87, that place is humongous. It's huge. They got it's like neighborhoods of tents, even RVs are down there.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. And I think that gets at the stuff that data doesn't tell us, right? I know that we've got a lot of questions in the Q&A also about the PIT data. So we're going to move on to talk about some different data sources, but just back to the point in time count real quick. There's a lot of questions about who is counted and who isn't counted. And I think all of those questions also get to no one source of data is going to be entirely accurate or tell the whole story, both because there are limitations to, you know, how we can't count everyone. That's just never going to happen with a visual count. And also there are limitations to the story that data can tell, because, you know, in some ways you have to talk to a human being to understand everything, and data is not going to tell us everything. That said, we're going to look at some more data because it is interesting and it is informative. So another main data source that we refer to and rely on is the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS. This is a database. It's a place to collect and store information that is county-wide. And the information in HMIS is put there, it's input by organizations that provide services. So put there by shelter programs and housing programs and outreach workers and anybody who is operating a service or a program that serves people who are unhoused, that is a participant, right? We have about 80 service providers currently that are putting data into HMIS. And it's information about the people that they serve, right? So there are questionnaires, there are intake forms, and information about unique individuals that is identified to that individual is put into HMIS. And then from that system, we can pull out aggregated or compiled, collected data that doesn't identify individual people, but gives us an understanding of who is being served, who is asking for assistance. I've put a link in the slide deck to a location on one of the county websites where there's actually HMIS data that's reported on a pretty regular basis if you're ever interested in looking at system-wide data. This covers the entire, the full county of Santa Clara. The last thing I need to cover before we get to this particular data points is another sort of wonky piece of system called the Coordinated Assessment System. The Coordinated Assessment System is a centralized referral system that is intended to identify people who are needing housing. So someone who needs housing support, someone who's unhoused, can access coordinated entry at a bunch of different places across the county, at shelters, sometimes at libraries, sometimes at some school sites, sometimes at, you know, drop-in centers, as many places as possible, so that those folks can get assessed. There's a standard assessment called the VI SPDAT that's currently in use. And the folks' responses to the questions on that assessment help the system to prioritize. So essentially, coordinated assessment recognizes that we don't have enough housing support resources to serve everyone. And so how do we make sure that everybody who needs housing assistance is connected to the housing that becomes available in the most streamlined way that is standard for everyone, right, across no matter where you are in the community? And how do we try to make those connections based on sort of agreed community structure, right? So coordinated assessment is essentially a system that tries to find out who needs help and also knows when slots open up in housing programs and makes those connections by making referrals. Coordinated assessment does not solve the problem of too few resources, right? Not everybody who gets assessed in coordinated assessment gets a referral simply because there aren't enough open spaces to refer them to. And then the last thing I'm going to say about coordinated assessment is the community is currently, the continuum of care, the broader community is currently in the process of redesigning the coordinated entry system. So if you're interested in this, feel free to reach out. We can tell you more about that process. So the data that we're going to look at here comes from people's responses to those assessments. And we're going to go through this pretty quickly so we can just get a picture of the folks who are in the coordinated assessment system who are connected to the city of Santa Clara. And then we'll move on because we've got other stuff to cover. So this 407 number, that's the number of households that are currently in coordinated assessment, and I'll tell you what that means in a second, who have a connection to the city of Santa Clara through where they live most or stay most of the time, where they go to school, where they go to work, some connection to the city. These 407 households are folks who have, one, been assessed. They've taken the VI SPDAT. They have said, I need help because I am currently unhoused, and they've taken that assessment. Two, they have not been housed since they took the assessment, according to HMIS. We don't have any record in HMIS of them being housed. So we expect that they are still unhoused. And then three, all of these people have had some sort of contact with a provider who is entering information into HMIS in the past 390 days. If no shelter, no outreach provider, no HMIS service provider has had contact with someone for the last 390 days, their assessment becomes inactive, right? So I point those things out just to give you a sense of who does this represent. This is people who have said, I am unhoused and I need help with housing, and we don't have any reason to believe that that has been resolved yet as of September 21st, or September 2021. Okay, so taking a look at what the HMIS data, the assessment data tells us about these 407 people, we see that in the age, a couple of things I want to call out, 26% of folks are in that 55 to 64 age range. One of the things we know from sort of emerging research is that we tend to see more early onset and more severe age-related health conditions in people who are unhoused, people who are homeless, than in people who are housed. So where we start thinking about services for older adults in general and sort of mainstream systems at 62 plus or 65 plus. In homeless systems, we're starting to think about older adult care starting around, that 55 to 64 range. So I wanted to call that out. And also, based on a recent community planning process that the county has done, we expect that youth aged 18 to 24 are actually underrepresented by this data. We know that there's a gap there. We're not assessing youth at as high of a rate as we're assessing older adults. So just things to keep in mind when we're thinking about this data. And then we also wanted to look at race and ethnicity demographics for those 407 households. This graph shows responses to questions about race and ethnicity in the same graph. So HMIS uses the same structure as the US Census for asking folks about race and ethnicity, which is there's one question about race, one about ethnicity, and the ethnicity questions ask, do you identify as, are you Hispanic or Latinx? Yes or no. So we've combined these. You'll see that each of these categories is a category that the US Census defines as a race category. And then in each of these categories, the yellow portion is folks who also identified as Hispanic or Latinx. So looking at the race and ethnicity data, the two largest by the numbers populations of folks who are unhoused are folks who are white and non-Hispanic or Latinx. That's the green portion of at about 37%. And then also folks who are Hispanic or Latinx, which is all of these yellow portions combined in all of these rows, all of these columns, at about 36% of the unhoused population. And then another way of looking at race and ethnicity is disproportionality. Where do we see the greatest overrepresentation by race and ethnicity in the unhoused population? So I'm going to call out, this is not about, this data in particular doesn't show really anything about the services that are being provided. This is not data about, how effectively the system is serving people of different races and ethnicities. We'd have to pull other data to actually look at that question. All this is showing is which populations are overrepresented in our unhoused population, right? So this is comparing the census data about the total population of the city of Santa Clara with the percentage of folks in those 407 folks in coordinated assessment who and what they responded about their race or ethnicity. And we see the most overrepresentation among Black and African American residents of the city, American Indian or Alaskan Native, and Hispanic or Latinx. So just a different way of looking at that race and ethnicity breakdown that we had on the last slide. I know that's a lot of data, and we're definitely going to continue conversations about that data moving into future task force meetings. So we will come back to the questions of what does HMIS data tell us? What does the PIT data tell us? We'll bring you more specific and more like a deeper dive data into certain areas at future meetings based on your interest. For the sake of time, I'm going to move us forward and go into some other context because we really want to get to having you start talking and start talking about some shared goals and values. So I'm going to move us on. And I want to talk about context about what is happening. What's happening in the community, what's happening in the city of Santa Clara to support people who are unhoused and to address some of the community impacts of homelessness. So one of the phrases that we use a lot, sort of jargon phrases that we use a lot, is supportive housing system. And what that means, it's a shorthand, it's an easy, quick way of referring to the supports that exist for folks who need help with housing and shelter. So supportive housing system sort of encompasses homelessness prevention, as well as emergency shelter, which provides a place to sleep at night. It includes housing programs that provide help paying rent, and also case management and services, connections to those resources that help folks stay healthy and well. And it also includes the coordinated assessment system, that referral system that connects people who need support to the agencies that provide it. The supportive housing system in Santa Clara County, countywide, is very large, very complex, and we are not going to look at all of the pieces of it today. We're actually just going to acknowledge that it exists, that there's a lot of work that's happening in shelter, in outreach, in housing programs, in healthcare, in schools, in all of these different areas that are currently supporting people. But what I do want to bring to y'all is a number. So since January of 2020, based on HMIS data from the Homeless Management Information System, almost 6,000 people have been housed in this supportive housing system countywide. So this number it's a number, right? There's only so much that numbers can tell us. But what this reflects is that there are almost 6,000 people who are in HMIS. We have a record of them moving into housing, or when they left the provider that was serving them, when that assistance ended, they said, yes, I am now housed, right? So they exited into housing or had a housing move-in date. And that's a large number of people. So we want to acknowledge that. We want to acknowledge that there is work that's happening and people are accessing, they are getting the support and housing that they need in a lot of cases. At the same time, we saw the point in time count data earlier where the number of people who are unhoused is not going down. And I think that also tells us something. It tells us there's a lot of work being done. And it also tells us that we need to continue working. We need to continue building creative strategies and solutions. So along those lines, I want to talk about the community plan to end homelessness. This was referenced, Joy brought this up earlier. She mentioned there's a Santa Clara County community plan to end homelessness, and the city of Santa Clara adopted it. What does that mean? Or endorsed it. What does that mean? The Santa Clara County community plan to end homelessness is countywide. It was developed in late 2019, early 2020 by a collaborative, a group called the Continuum of Care. It's a countywide, really, really large group that just tries to work together collaboratively to end homelessness. It was led by a community plan work group and steering committee, both of which had representation from various city jurisdictions across the county, providers, the County of Santa Clara, and some folks with lived experience being unhoused. That plan was informed by a big community engagement process. We had focus groups, we had interviews, we had a number of open community meetings at various places across the county. We met with city departments, and we had a survey with about 5,000 responses in multiple languages. At the end of that, we had a plan, right? And the Santa Clara City Council endorsed that plan in 2021. And the plan looks like this. This is just the 3 overarching strategies of the plan. We really, really encourage members of the task force to check out the community plan. We're not going to read through it today, but the 3 main strategies, the 3 main buckets of strategies are trying to figure out what is causing homelessness in the County of Santa Clara and addressing those causes, expanding the resources that exist to prevent and end homelessness, and improving quality of life for everyone in our communities. We know that hygiene services, trash pickup, safety, and shelter are all really big concerns as we work on the underlying causes that cause people to live outside. So the main thing we want to call out about the plan is that for today is that it exists, and it's extensive, it's big, because it's a big effort, it's a big proposition, it's a big goal to try to reduce the impacts of homelessness and to end homelessness at the county level. But that is not the responsibility of this task force. You all are responsible for thinking about the sort of city of Santa Clara in the context of the larger county. And we want to really call out that while we encourage you all to take a look at the community plan to end homelessness, the city of Santa Clara is not responsible for accomplishing all of that, right? City of Santa Clara is developing this city strategic plan in order to identify where city resources are best spent and what the city's best, most effective role is in that broader work, right? So we want to make sure that we're staying aligned with the county community plan, but also focusing on the city of Santa Clara, its resources, its strengths, and its needs. Then I'm just going to quickly highlight a few of the strategies that are currently happening with a focus on what's happening in the city of Santa Clara. This is absolutely not exhaustive. This is highlights and examples of some of the efforts the city is engaged in. So we have a countywide affordable housing bond Measure A in 2016. There are 3 Measure A developments, either existing or planned. One of them has already been called out, Calabasas Community Apartments. There are 2 apartment developments that are planned for the city of Santa Clara that are not open yet using Measure A funding, and it's Agri-Hood Senior Apartments and Kiefer Senior Apartments. So 2 affordable housing developments focused on seniors. Another example of affordable housing within the city of Santa Clara, there's a state funding stream called Home Key. There's a Home Key project that is going to happen to renovate the Bella Vista Inn, which will create 64 new affordable apartment units. So again, these strategies, things like having more places that people can afford to live, and a super important effort under the community plan's goals. And there are things that are happening. But one of the things we'll want to talk about is how does affordable housing development fit into what the city wants to do moving forward, right? What are the resources that exist even to do more of this? What are the barriers? What are the challenges? Another piece where the city is a contributor in a county-wide effort is the homelessness prevention system. There is a coordinated community-wide network, a system of homelessness prevention providers. And the city of Santa Clara is a funding partner, along with a number of partner agencies and other funders. And you can see this general sort of rough map of locations of the partner agencies that provide prevention services. This is homelessness prevention in maybe another area we want to explore, right? There's an existing robust system, but we might want to look into, are the locations of the service providers serving the city of Santa Clara? Is there a gap somewhere? I mean, they are literally serving people in the city of Santa Clara, but are the locations really meeting the need in terms of the physical geographic locations that people can go to? Is that good? There are things that are gaps, questions like that are things that we might ask y'all to think about. Another strategy spotlight. So there is a tenant-based rental assistance project that is administered by the city of Santa Clara. This is often referred to just as TBRA. And TBRA is funding that can go to cities. And in the city of Santa Clara, this particular project provides housing assistance, so help paying rent, and also case management, right? So support connecting to services, specifically for families with children who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk. And then there's a lot of other strategies that are happening, right? The city contributes to case management for supportive housing programs. The city contributes to mobile shower and laundry services, landlord tenant mediation and other tenant protections and supports. And then just a range of other services that the city supports, such as services for survivors of domestic violence and other sectors of the community that really do the work of preventing and ending homelessness for people because they provide some of those life supports that are needed. And then we also want to call out the City of Santa Clara Police Department does have a homeless outreach team, which is an alternative law enforcement approach to homeless outreach. So it's a quick whirlwind context of what's happening, of some of what's happening, right? And we want to start just laying the foundation of information about what's going on in the city and broader in the county, as I said, because we'll want to come back over the course of the next meetings. We have a lot of time to come back to what are you interested in? What do we hear from the community engagement process, our needs? What parts of this system, what parts of these strategies do we want to expand, replicate, tweak, add to? What's missing? Thank you all so much for your patience as I talk at you through those slides. I really appreciate it. And I apologize that we don't have a whole lot of time for questions and comments about that, simply because I want to prioritize talking about some shared goals and values. But if someone who hasn't asked a question yet wants to have an opportunity to jump on and ask a question, we can take maybe one or two. Any questions about any of the things that we've presented today?
Just a lot to absorb.
It is a lot to absorb, and luckily we have multiple 2-hour meetings to let it start sinking in.
Right.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So we want to end today by talking about shared goals and values for this task force, for you all as a group. And what we're going to be asking of you is, well, what we won't be asking of you, just so you have some context. We don't expect you all, and we don't need you all to agree on everything, right? We want to hear what each of you has to bring as individual human beings and task force members. When we won't ask you to do a whole lot of outside research, you are welcome to, but that is not something that's expected of you. We're not going to send you loads of data reports to review. And we are not going to ask you to write the city's plan. We don't think that you need to take on all of those things. But what we will ask you to do is to talk to each other, to talk with us, to work together, and identify the sort of questions and priorities that are important to you all individually and as a group. To be here to share your thoughts and opinions, but also to listen and learn. And specifically, we're really looking forward to working with you to guide and support the community engagement process, where we can start working with you to reach out to the community as a whole and get broader input. So with that background, we're going to, I really like this framing that I did, so I'm going to go through it quickly. I don't think y'all need it, but why do we develop shared goals and values? Because if we don't talk about it ahead of time, we're all going to bring different things to the table. And that's great, but when we want to get work done, it's helpful if the things we're bringing to the table fit together, right? So we want to make sure we're working in the same direction. And again, we don't have to agree, but we want to be working towards at least the same general goals and purpose. So the first way of looking at that shared purpose is goals, right? Goals are things that we want to accomplish through this process, things that should exist in the world or should happen as a result of this process. For example, one goal of the task force is that Homebase and the city are able to write a strategic plan that is informed by you all and by community engagement. That's the biggest concrete goal, of the task force. But you all can have other goals, right? We can set other targets for what you all want to do as a group. So we want to start that conversation now. And I'm going to switch my share a little bit. And I'm just going to use this slide to take some notes. Right. So give yourself a few seconds to think, what goals would you like the task force to set? What would you like to work towards? And we're going to just hear everybody and put everything on the slide. And then we'll follow up with you before the next meeting to do a prioritization exercise to see which goals we want to keep as a group. But for now, we're just brainstorming, and we welcome you to throw out any goals that you have.
Sure, I can share some goals.
Thanks.
To get going. I think it'd be interesting to see if we could set, one of the things that jumped out in the point in time count numbers was that the metric was that we were looking at a population of 300 to 350 people that have been counted here. be interesting to see if we could set some metric goals for the city of Santa Clara in terms of housing production and both permanent and interim solutions to try and, whether that's identifying pieces of land or planning to build a certain number of units, but trying to set some real goals for the city that we could strive to. And then my second goal would be to figure out how we can, and I think we've heard this from a couple leaders today already, like Dante, but figure out how we can better engage the voice of lived experience in decisions that the city is making that may impact them in their lives. So lifting up that voice and making it a part of the leadership structure.
Thanks, Ray. Anybody else have goals they want to suggest?
One of my goals would be to take all of the mobile homes and motor homes that are out there and have a special place for them to be. Because I think that throughout the different cities, I think our city, I see a lot more mobile homes and motor homes. And wouldn't it be awesome to have a park for them, and have them be responsible for, how that park is run and clean, all that good stuff.
Yeah. That's definitely a strategy that we can discuss with the group for sure. Any other goals for the work that you're going to do together? What you want to come out of the task force work?
For me, I'd like to create a bold but achievable plan, not a plan that sits on a shelf like so many other plans do. So something that we can really work towards, and again, I think you do that by setting the realistic, goals of how to get there.
Yeah.
For me, I think that I want us to definitely focus on the needs of people who are unhoused in the city of Santa Clara, but also not forget to acknowledge that the problem is regional. And if we don't, for example, have the city and the county working together, or the city working closely with adjoining or with neighboring cities, that we may solve for one problem and still be impacted by another problem, if that makes any sense. So address the needs in the city of Santa Clara, but also think about how our work here impacts and is impacted by the region.
Mm-hmm.
I would wonder about whether we would consider accompanying services. The graphic that you showed about the causes or the reasons why people are unhoused makes me think that maybe there have to be other services available, and what's our capacity to serve in that area in order to make housing sustainable.
Yeah. So a goal being to think beyond just the housing piece to the supports that folks might need. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These are great, folks. Any other goals you all want to throw out?
I just have one. I just remember that a lot of the people that I've encountered when I was on my journey, a lot of them are afraid to get housed, and a lot of them won't leave their encampments. And I want to be able to reach out to those people that don't know how to fit into society,
Mhm.
you know, be part of society, because they've been living outside for so long, they wouldn't know how to be a neighbor in a housing setting. So that was something I would like to see happen. And a lot of them don't like to live alone. So when they live in these homeless encampments, they're surrounded by other people. And they don't have the services like other people may have that are accounted for. And so I noticed that this is like the majority.
Mhm.
I want to find a way to get services out to these people that are afraid to ask for help or to be, you know, considered part of the population to be housed. So that's something I want to implement if possible.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm piggybacking a little bit on what Michelle just said, just somehow making the services that are available more known. A lot of the great information and content you went over, like I wasn't aware of, was a part of Santa Clara or available to residents or folks who are just in Santa Clara at the time of their homelessness. So how to get that information out to the community.
Great. Okay. So we will take this list of goals, and sorry to have to cut it off, but we do want to let you go on time because it's late. We'll take this list of goals and put it in a format that all the task force members can access and work on between now and the next meeting. One of the things we'll ask you to do is take a look. If you want to add a goal, there'll be a way for you to do that. And then we'll also ask you to identify which ones of these really speak to you, right? So we can come back and start the next meeting with, okay, these are the goals. These are the goals that you all identified the most as being ones you want to work on. If that ends up being all of them, if there's consistent recognition that we want to do all those things, that's great. But we do want to let everybody weigh in on the goals, even the folks that we didn't hear from today. And with that, I'm going to pass to, I believe, Jesse to wrap us up. Is that right?
Yes, thanks, Eli. We wanted to just give you all kind of a quick preview of what's to come with the task force. I know we ran out of time for some of the discussion for today, but we've got a lineup of 6 meetings with you all, and we're looking forward to continuing the discussion. So we kicked off today with our first task force meeting, talking about shared vision and goals. We'll be talking a little bit more at our next meeting about kind of some of the areas, priorities, and areas of focus that you all want to spend our time on in this task force, and also start talking about some of the plans for community engagement. So we want to hear from all members of the community through that process, and want to get all of your input on who we should talk to and the plan for getting that feedback from folks in the community. At future meetings, we'll be talking a little bit more about some of the data that Eli got a little bit into today, but we'll dig into that a little bit more and start identifying some of the needs and places that we need to talk about a little bit more as part of these meetings. And then as we get into the summer, we'll be kind of identifying some of the goals and objectives for the plan and discussing those with you all, and getting into September, where we will be hopefully in a place where we are drafting that plan. If we go to the next slide, we just wanted to give you a quick preview of some of the community engagement that we have planned for this process. Eli, if you could go to the next slide. Thanks. We're hoping to talk with you all a little bit more about at the next meeting, to host a community-wide kickoff meeting, start identifying folks for stakeholder interviews, and start talking about some of the focus groups that we'll be hosting with folks with lived experience of homelessness and other people, other stakeholders across the systems. So If we go to the next slide, just a reminder that our next meeting is going to be again on the fourth Thursday of the month, so May 26th. We'll see you all back here from 6 to 8 p.m. and dig into some of those topics around community engagement. So please feel free to reach out to us, the Home-Based team, if you have any questions about today's meeting, or if you have any thoughts on discussion for future meetings. We look forward to continuing this conversation, and we so appreciate everybody on the task force and also the members of the public who joined us today. So with that, we will close the meeting, and thank you all for your time, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.